Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Grow Yourself, where we love to have guests that are experts or have a profound story or have a really interesting background, all for the purposes of helping us learn, grow, and change as human beings. You know, I have to start this particular podcast because if it's not in my sweet spot of the work that I do, it is certainly in the sweet spot of the things that I love to talk about, the things that frankly, that I think about a lot. And everyone in this context, particularly around this time of year, there's a lot of discussion about goals and purpose and all these other sorts of things. And everyone talks about finding your why, that big, bold purpose that, drives you forward. And as Simon Sinek famously said, start with your why. However, my guest, and I'm in complete alignment with him, we believe that there's a deeper truth involved here, and you know, and part of the belief is that your why only stands strong when it's built on a solid who. So the first question that we should be asking ourselves, particularly or reminding ourselves, is the question of who am I? The idea that when you know who you are, your heart, your values, your spirituality, your strengths, your weaknesses, uh, your purpose, it stops being, something you chase. It becomes something that really more naturally flows out of you. And I believe that with all my heart. As a result, your purpose no longer, I wouldn't say no longer, but is less fragile. It's less borrowed. It feels less borrowed. It's less breakable. And so today we're gonna go beneath the goals. We're gonna explore identity, self-awareness, because again, when you get to the who am I, when you get that right, everything else, I believe, and I believe my guest believes, falls more into place and more appropriately, more authentically into place. So my guest is David Osk. He's an entrepreneur with products in over 3,700 retail stores, including giants like Home Depot and Lowe's. David also collaborates closely with Dr. Andy Garrett as the lead coach for the transformative True North Resiliency Program. David believes that understanding who are you on a granular level is key to understanding your why and of in terms of what you do. He often says, never start with why, start with who. He is currently writing a book, The Guardians of Grit, which aims to empower fathers in raising uncrushable sons. And I don't want to forget to ask him about this because I think there's an incredible piece here as it relates to who are you when we talk about kids or youth. So in any event, I would love to just now invite and welcome David Osk, who is not far from here. He lives just up north of Nashville. David, thank you so much for being on Grow Yourself.
Hey, I'm really honored to be here, and I mean that. It was fun just having just a short conversation before we started here, and just start learning a little bit about your life, and to be sitting before a man who's been married almost 40 years and served our country in the military. Yeah, really glad to be sitting here with you.
Yeah,
So thanks for
yeah,
having me.
it's kind words. I appreciate it as well. And I in just kind of doing a little research with you, and again, we only live probably 50 miles away from each other, maybe even less. I'm looking for a time for us to meet halfway and have lunch somewhere and talk more about this. But listen, if we could get started with a very simple question, I want to ask David Osk, who are you?
That's a great question. It's a funny thing, by the way. I'll start with a little bit of a story. So, have you ever seen the movie? It's an old movie, probably 20 years old, called Anger Management.
I have. Yes, that
And
was a great movie.
it's a little tacky. Like there's some
Yeah.
stuff in there. It's like, oh my gosh. But there's a scene in there when, oh my gosh, what's the main character?
Well, there's
Um,
Robert De Niro, and then there's Billy Crystal, I think is his name. Right?
um,
Isn't that right?
yeah. Well,
He
no, I
was the
think
therapist.
It's Jack Nicholson, and It's the guy that does
Oh,
Adam Sandler. It's his character.
yes,
And
my bad. Okay, I'm
no, no,
thinking of
no.
another movie. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so he gets they kind of set him up and frame him as it were, that he's got anger problems, and they get him in this group with a bunch of weird misfits, and Jack Nicholson's character asks him in front of everybody, "Who are you?" And so he starts, well, I'm married, I have kids, and I do this for a job. He's like, no, 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 no. I don't want to know what you do. Just tell us who you are.
Hmm.
And he starts kind of, and it's really a comical moment because I think everybody who's, watching it and even the people in the room, we when we start to describe, who we
Hmm.
are, we often look to, well,
Hmm.
I like to sing, or I like to golf, or I'm a plumber, or I'm a
Hmm.
doctor, you start describing, your activities and so on.
Yeah.
And so I do think that, it's not just super cut and dry, like who are you? Because it's really multifaceted.
Mm.
And so let me just put maybe some pins on the paper that would kind of help describe, what is it that makes up someone. And, so some of the stuff, especially that I learned with Dr. Andy Garrett, like, what are your core values, right? And we talk about those, those things a lot, especially in a corporate setting, right? We have our
Hmm.
core values for our
Yeah.
company and all this kind of thing. But it's a fascinating concept, when you actually start drilling into the hierarchy of the things that rise to the top for you.
Mm.
Like what does your core happen to value most of all in this life?
Mm.
And in the English language, there's maybe 75 or so potential core values with some overlap, of course. But if you start to identify those things and prioritize them, not that you don't, kind of have the rest of those, but again, those things that really rise to the top for you, yours and mine will be different.
Mm.
But then if you start, um, coupling those with maybe convictions, right? What do you believe is right and wrong? That's different than a value. A value is kind of a matrix at which you make decisions through. Well, what about a virtue? Like what type of an impact do you want to have on other people? And that's, so that's just three things. And so, I often like to say,
Mm.
like, and I got this from a Nissan commercial, what is it that gives your goosebumps? Like
Interesting.
it's a fascinating thing that,
Yeah.
like, wow, I remember my grandmother, she loved doing bookkeeping, and she would be sitting at her desk just kind of bouncing up and down with giddiness because she
Wow.
loved to find problems with someone's books, like just to go in and
Wow.
dig and figure out where they lost a penny somewhere. And when she solved that problem, I mean, she literally would just get up and dance around her desk.
That's crazy.
And but that's the kind of stuff, the little
Yeah.
nuances, or how about this, the clues that start to describe yeah, just the uniqueness that's inside of us. And then, of course, you mentioned like strengths and how do you want to apply those things. And then, if someone starts asking you questions like, what is it that breaks your heart? What problem do you want to solve in this world? If you were to write your own eulogy, how about this from, the perspective of your spouse or your children, or how about I've known you for about 15 minutes. Like, what would I
Mm.
want Kevin to say about me? Right? Those are
Love it.
those are
Love it.
some clues. Those are some things that now you have something, in somewhat of an abstract way to back into that helps to describe those things that are so core, to who you are. So, okay, so to answer your question, who am I, right? Well, a front-facing level, and it took me a while to I guess kind of come to this. I am most definitely a creative at heart.
Mm. Love it.
I've got one book published. I'm working on a new one. I've got, different products in retail stores. I just licensed another one to Lennox, the HVAC distributor.
Fine.
I've written songs. I've recorded 3 records. I'm a vocalist. I've moved to Nashville like a million other people to do music. And so I think there's something about that's, so core to my nature. I don't care if I'm creating a book, a song, or how about this, an environment,
Mm.
right? So wherever I go, I want people to not only feel creative and curious about what's possible, but I like to create an atmosphere where people feel like they can explore that inner world and express it
Wow.
in a really safe way.
Yeah.
So,
That's
yeah.
cool. I mean, you know, to think about creativity and where it comes into one's life, how I would say we creatives operate. I have to admit, I until you said that I thought about creating an environment. That is a creative endeavor, isn't it? It's not just like building an environment, it's creating one. I'd never
Yeah.
thought about it in that context. One thing that caught my attention though is you talked about, identify what breaks your heart.
Mm.
Um, uh, yeah, why is that important? But maybe, where is that going? When you ask that question to, let's say, people that
Yeah.
you might be speaking to, what are you trying to get to?
Right. That's a great question. So my buddy Quentin Hafner, who actually used to live in Franklin, lives out in Orange County now, but he wrote a book called Go Next Level. And so
Mm,
some of the book is really starting with that bedrock, starting to identify what's going on under the hood. And so he asks some of those questions in his book. And it's, like, yeah, what is it that breaks your heart? Well, so yeah, to your question then, what is it pointing to? Well, obviously, if I drill into something in this world that breaks my heart, there's a clue there. There's something that I care
mm,
really, really deeply about. And,
mm,
for some people, it might be, I mean, it could be, I care that people are, eating healthy food or, organic food, or there's, so again, there's a thread that continues there. You care for their health, their body. This person values the cells in someone's body and that they're thriving and not dying and, things like that. And some people might care deeply about, you know, how about sex trafficking? Or I've got
mhm,
some friends who are really big into that world and trying to, stamp that out. In fact, I was for a short time as well. And, so I think that this idea of what problem do you want to solve,
mhm,
uniquely. And again, it's a, um, I think if you use a bit more graphic language, like, what is it that breaks your heart? What is it that infuriates you? Well, it kind of tricks your brain into, getting to the heart of the matter a bit quicker, as opposed to being a bit more, a bit more vague. But again,
yeah.
that's the answers to those questions are going to be different for everybody.
Very interesting. And as you've already said, and now emphasizing, is that when you ask even questions like what breaks your heart, you get down more into the core of your deeper beliefs, your, as you said, deeper values. You start to really figure out what you care about, and so that's very interesting. I will say and then ask David, I've, like you, probably I've asked, a million people, who are you? Or ask about, what are your core values? And what really strikes me is how difficult. Now, this might be in a workshop setting,
Yeah.
so maybe I'm putting them on the spot a little bit, but consistently over years, maybe decades, I've found people having a really hard time answering those questions. Why would
Oh,
you suspect that?
yeah, yeah. I think on a very practical level, it's just not something that I suppose generationally, people have talked about. I mean,
Mm,
I think that here we live a bit of a in the United States anyway, right? We have a bit more margin. We have a bit more
yes,
time on our hands, like our grandparents versus parents. There wasn't I think on a very practical level, there wasn't a ton of time to just be a bit more introspective, right? I mean, look at the folks that went through the Depression and all that. They're in survival mode.
yes,
When you can't put food on the table, I heard, was it Dave Ramsey said, money is kind of like air. Try to live without it. So if someone is in survival mode, they're not worried about, all of that inner world, right? They're like, I've got kids, I got a wife, I got a mortgage. Like they're trying to figure life out. So I think that generationally there was, very practical reasons that people weren't as introspective and didn't have the margin to, to drill into those types of things. And here's the funny thing though, that doesn't mean that it was a good thing either, right? Because you had a
mm,
lot of people, even still, I had a conversation with a guy that I'm coaching the other day who, became an attorney because, his dad was, his brother, his uncle, it was just expected that
yeah,
he was going to be an attorney. That dude is miserable. He hates it.
wow,
And he made it. He's been doing it for 20 years, but he's depressed. And
wow.
so I think that so my point is, what if he would have had some margin, if he would have had some permission to do a little bit of some inner work and figure out what is it that is, really lights him up and doesn't light his dad up, and doesn't feel like he was railroaded into some job. Man, can
Mm,
you imagine the Yeah, the
Yeah.
energy, if you, as it were, that would come
Wow.
off of this guy, and if he were to find something that were more true to his
Yeah.
nature.
What a great example you just presented there, because I'm sitting here thinking to myself, if you would ask that person immersed in his world as an attorney and asked him, who are you? The answer could be anything from, well, I'm my dad's son. I'm doing what my dad did. Oh, okay. Well, do you like it? No. Why? Well, because that's not who I am. Oh,
Yeah.
well, then who are you? I mean,
Well,
it really, it's
so I want to back up too, though.
please.
Here's what's fascinating is you know it's almost like I contradicted myself. So we aren't what we do for a living, right? I mean, he's not an attorney,
Right,
right? I'm not a plumber, or electrician, or and
right.
all this kind of thing. So I think we need to be careful by just having these two camps pitted against one another. But here's the funny thing:
Mm,
what you do for a living, how about this? What you spend the majority of your time and effort in, has such an impact on you. And if you feel like you're, the square peg round hole, and if you feel like you're always operating in a bunch of weakness, well, the who, right? The type of impact you want to have on your clients, your family, people at the gas station, that cohesive part of, who you are and how you express yourself and what your desired impact is, will be largely stifled, right? I mean, you can imagine
that's
if,
right.
Michelangelo, well, you're going to be an accountant, buddy. Like your dad, and he had to spend 40 hours a week or something sitting behind a desk and not painting and sculpting and, like expressing that true side of him. Isn't it wonderful that he had the ability, I guess, that worked out where he could actually live in his zone of genius? I'm borrowing that line from
Mm,
the Big Leap book. But
mm,
anyway, um, it's a yeah, so how about this? It's messy, it's complicated. So yes, you have values, convictions, goosebumps, strengths, convictions, what breaks your heart, eulogies, all of those things that describe your inner world, but your outer world affects those as well. So in order for you to kind of, live that life that it just seems more true to your nature, and again, there's no utopia here, it helps to have all of that self-awareness. But again, if you feel like you're trapped, if you're operating, inside of a capacity where your energy is drained all day long and you're operating in
mm.
areas of insecurity and weakness, right? Because I'd be the worst accountant in the world. I
Here,
might, I
here.
might, I might,
I don't
everybody in
know.
that, well,
Get behind me.
but everybody, hey, how about this?
Hmm.
Everybody in that office,
Yeah,
right, might be coming to my funeral more
yeah.
than anybody else in that office
Wow.
because I love them well and I inspired them.
Yeah.
But as far as me operating inside of a context that is just not true to my nature, it's going
Yeah.
to drain a lot of my life, my energy, or whatever you want to call it, right? And
Mm.
so I think one informs the other in both directions.
No, that's fair enough and well said. This reminds me of a guy that I haven't seen actually in a long time, but his daughter and my daughter were in school together and kind of grew up and did Girl Scouts together, whatever. And we mostly saw the mother. I think my wife was teaching her piano, so we would see her fairly often, but rarely saw the father, about once a year or maybe two times a year at the most. And anytime I'd run into him, I'd go, hey, hey, Johnny, how you doing? He's like, hey, Kevin, this, that, and the other. I say, how's it going? And he would, ev- and I'm not kidding here, probably for at least 15 years, he would immediately, and because there was so much space between the time we'd see each other, I think he would forget that he told me this. But I kid you not, for 15 years, he would start ranting on how much he hated his job.
Mm,
And
mm,
it was with a big company, and he was fairly successful, and I think he was at a manager's level, and this, that, and the other. But every single year, he would go off on this rant and just
yeah.
keep talking about it. I did finally one year. It might have been the last time I saw him. Now that I think about it, I said, "Well, Johnny, why don't you move on? Why are you still there?" I started to dig deeper and tell him, for the last 15 years, you've said this with deep conviction about how much you hate your job.
Yeah.
Yet every year I come back and you're doing it again and you complain again. I didn't go there with him because we were just kind of in passing. But I think that's just evidence, that could be an extreme case, but I don't think he's rare.
Well, and so one could speculate, right? Why? I've known
Yeah,
people like that. They
yeah.
they double down
Yeah.
on misery.
Yeah.
I mean, heck, look at it this way. What if, you think of even relationships, dating relationships, right?
Hmm.
There's stuff all over social media, like, women who end up dating the bad boy and the people that, some dude who treats them badly, and they do it 10 times, right? Well, how
It's
about this?
incredible. Yeah.
You've got a job, you're gonna do that job for 10 years and you hate it.
And you hate it.
Why?
Yeah.
I'll be honest. I think it's because they don't know what else to go to. They don't have that sense of self-awareness, meaning this is what I value, this is what I don't. These are the things that light me up. These are the types of people that I love to surround myself with. These are the types of conversations that I enjoy. These are the types of words that I like to use. This is my desired, dent in the universe. So they're going from, something to nothing. There's
Mm.
nothing there's nothing to steer their decision making. And I think it's really, that's why this idea of, again, for lack of a better word, in some ways I don't like the term, but self-awareness. It's like, man, you had better start developing all of those attributes that make you you, or you're probably going to be living someone else's life, right? You're going to be maybe looking up to someone you think is winning, right? On social media, go
Right.
figure.
Yep.
Or I don't care who it is, Joe
Yeah.
Rogan or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you're going to be starting to kind of live this phony life and acting
That's
a
right.
certain way, as opposed to, I like, Seth Godin has that phrase, people like us do things like this,
Mhm.
right? Well, what does someone like me do in a situation like this? Am I going to double down on stupid? Am I going to double down on misery? Am I going to double down on being rejected, being marginalized? I don't care if it's, a people group that you feel like is being unfair to you or marginalizing you or whatever it might be. You
Yeah.
go back to that trough time and time again. You
Yeah.
continue to live in the same neighborhood, do the same things. I mean, whose fault is that?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that like it's fault in the typical sense, but if you just lack that sense of self-awareness,
Yeah.
man, you have to, you got to point the finger somewhere, and then,
Yeah.
okay, if I don't want to do this, where am I going to start in
Yeah.
order to make better decisions?
And I think you and I both know, and the large majority of the viewers will know this as well, is that, you just, the older you get, the more invested you get in the life that you have, good or bad,
Yeah,
the harder it is to change.
yeah,
You just get so invested and, once let's take Johnny, once his kids, which I'm sure they're already out, but I mean, you can take probably any juncture of his life, but let's just say this: once his one of his kids starts in college, you're in for another at least 4 or 5 years, and then if you have another kid, another 4 or 5 years, meaning you can't move because financially you can't afford to do it. Is at least the mindset, because
yeah,
but let me do ask that question. I'm not saying it's that they shouldn't or it's impossible to do, but the
yeah.
more you invest in your current life, the harder it is to get out of it.
Oh, sure, sure. Yeah,
So,
yeah,
and that's why we always say, many of us parents always say, do things, do exciting things when you're young. When you have when you don't you have a little less to risk. Where you don't have a bunch of bills already piled up anymore. But go ahead,
here's a
please,
quick comment. So
please.
there's a study that was done years ago, and I think it was Dr. Andy that actually introduced me to this, where he said the number one precursor for happiness, actually, let me back into it. The number one precursor for unhappiness is feeling trapped
Oh boy.
and feeling like you're stuck, right?
Makes
And how
sense.
about this? I've created all of this and I put myself in the prison.
Yeah.
So, how about this? The number one precursor for happiness, though, is feeling like you have agency and autonomy, like you're not trapped, and I can actually make some decisions. So, I think what's really important to understand is that, okay, if I've made a mess, and we've all done it. I mean,
100%.
I remember when my wife and I got married, right?
Yeah.
We doubled down on credit cards and car payments and the whole nine yards, and then went through Ramsey's program and started getting out of debt. And man, it was funny how all of a sudden the cage felt less
Yeah.
confining. And
Yeah.
so I think it's important to just acknowledge what reality is, but then say, okay, am I going to double down on stupid? Am I going to double down on trapped? Or am I going to, how about this? am I going to surround myself with other people? In the counsel of many, there's wisdom, and get some advice on how to look at this situation right now, realizing I'm not alone. I don't have to have all the answers. And guess what? There might be some other options that I
Yeah.
just don't know about because I don't know what I don't know. So there's always room to grow and to change. It might happen a little slowly, but man, I tell you, if you want to live a life of misery, shut the door to options, shut the door to self-awareness, shut the door to your own heart, and give someone else the keys to your life and just accept the fact that you're trapped because you're
That
not.
that's a beautiful thing, you know. So then why, why don't more people pursue the who am I and all the things that you just spoke about? Why do people seemingly choose to stay stuck and
Yeah,
not do
so
anything?
So I think it's probably complicated, right? It's for
Fair enough.
what if, how about this? I was actually thinking about this morning. What if someone there's a friend of mine in Massachusetts actually that I'm going to be coaching through some of the material that I work through and so on. And he's kind of hesitant. And I'll be honest, I think in his case, I think he's afraid that he won't find anything. I think that when he was
Hmm.
probably growing up, he was picked on. He was told by his parents that he was less than, or whatever that language is, right? Probably, uh, I think he grew up with a dad who was there, but rather just indifferent, just didn't have an intellectual, emotional capacity just to love this guy and tell him that he was made of something spectacular and that we're going to get the shovel out and start digging and help define, what God wrote on your heart that is absolutely beautiful and powerful and unique. So he's just afraid that if he starts doing a bit of digging, that he's not going to find anything.
Yeah.
And of course, that couldn't be anything further from the truth.
Yeah.
And but then I think on another level too is how about this? Just general awareness around this kind of space, right? We often
Hmm.
think that there's some guru who's going to tell us what to think, and we can ride some wave of feeling good or all the time or whatever it is. Here's the fascinating thing though. There is a guru. His name is love.
Hmm.
And guess what else? Where do we get the word authenticity from? It comes from the word author. And so I was speaking at an event with Dr. Andy in Jamaica to a bunch of executives, master's, doctorate level people. And I asked the question to this
Hmm.
room, anybody know where we get the word authenticity from?
Mm.
No, these are very sophisticated people,
Sure.
leaders in industry, and none of them, they were all looking at each other kind of laughing like they should know this.
Yeah.
Well, it comes from the word author.
Mm.
So here's some bubbles to pop that I think are super helpful. We often, because of our, how about this? Maybe it's our insecurity and pride or
Hmm.
arrogance or ignorance.
Hmm.
We think that yes, we have all this agency and autonomy. Well, we do with
Hmm.
what we have been given, right? I didn't make me. I didn't choose the popular one, right? You didn't choose your skin color. Well, no kidding,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah,
I
man,
didn't
yeah.
choose my eye color. I didn't choose my taste
Hmm.
buds.
Hmm.
I didn't choose what time I was born in history and what family. I didn't choose my DNA, my fingerprint, my retina scan, any of this stuff. And here's what's fascinating too. We don't choose our own personalities. We choose nothing. We get to choose what we do with it. But how do we know that's true? And by the way, I was in I
Mm.
was in another room one time and I mentioned we don't choose our own personalities, and there was a
Yeah.
couple people in there that I thought were wanting to fight me.
Yeah.
But here's what's fascinating is children. So here's this is a law like gravity. When children are growing up, they're whatever. How about this? Weeks old. And
Mm.
Kevin, how many kids do you have?
I have three.
Okay.
Yeah,
So when they were growing up, within just a matter of days and weeks, right? You could sense that their little spirit was just so precious and unique.
that's right.
Well, when their sibling came along, they're very different. Within within weeks and months, and
Yeah,
especially years 2, 3, and 4, or whatever, they're so different than their sibling.
that's
And
right.
then the third one comes along, and you're like, how did we birth three kids that
Yeah,
couldn't be more polar opposite?
that's right.
Like it's wild.
No, it's really wild.
But
Yeah.
guess what? Here you and I, grown men, and we're sitting here having this, sophisticated, I'm being kind of funny, right? Sophisticated talk on authenticity and identity and all this kind of thing. Well, kids, they're not thinking about that,
No.
right? What are they doing? They're
They're
being
being
authentic.
authentic. That's exactly
They're
right.
not generating anything,
No.
right? And what's the most important uh, paradigm for young people in life? It's to be loved. It's
Hmm.
to have an external, how about this, for lack of a better word, since I mentioned it, guru, right? The parents loving those kids and raising them, causing them to rise.
Yeah.
But what's the worst thing you could say to your kids? Why can't you be like me? Or why can't you be like
Yeah.
your older brother? Why can't
Yeah.
you be like someone else?
Yeah.
No, the opposite is then thus has to be true, which is what? Man, I think you're fantastic. And
Yeah.
as you grow, we're going to start identifying, right? Identity. We're going to start identifying all of the beautiful characteristics that rise to the top for you. And I'm going to get behind that. I'm going to get under that. I'm going to pull that out of you and we're going to do this together. It's what everybody dreams about, right? I want somebody to see me for who I am and love me completely and utterly.
Yes, and depending on the child, and I could say I was much like this, depending on the child, I I, I wished that more parents would understand. Well, I think a lot of parents understand this, but maybe are not sufficiently aware of how it directs or informs a kid, and that is that if whether it's a parent that's even well-intended putting their kid down all the time,
Yeah.
or if it's uh, um, their peers, putting them down,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and at the same time, that kid is, and this was me. I was an admirer. I admired other people. I'm still like
Sure.
that. And
Yeah.
it's not to me, I don't
That's
criticize
great.
myself at this
Yeah.
point. Yes.
Yeah.
However, when you contrast that somebody is telling you how pitiful you are and how
Oh,
lazy you
yeah.
are, whatever it is. And
Yeah.
on the other hand, you're an admirer. You grow up comparing yourself to everyone else. And there is it can be because we're not talking about what I learned later in life as a younger adult is somebody talked to me about this idea of of looking at people and admiring, let's say, a personal trait and say, I'd like to be able to listen like that person does. That's different emulating
Yeah.
than looking
Yeah.
at that person and say, wow, I wished I was just like them.
Yep.
And I think it's a very, very important thing, and you can inform us better on this, especially around the book that you're writing, for parents to understand this concept of how basic practices um, to be aware of what their kid is thinking, I guess you could say, or
Yeah. Yeah.
seeing.
Well, and here's something else, right? Obviously, children, I mean, if they feel attacked, put down, whether that's their parents or siblings or friends or whatever else, that's one thing. But
Hmm.
guess what? You know, here's another movie reference, and this sounds kind of stupid to say, but I'm going to say it. Remember the movie Liar Liar, when Jim
Hmm.
Carrey's character goes in the bathroom and kicks his own butt? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's but here's the funny thing, right? We all do that.
Yeah,
We all
sure.
have, and we all
Yeah,
have that sinful side of us where we're kicking our own butts all the time.
yeah,
Why?
yeah,
It's because we just live in a broken freaking world
yeah,
and we're not home yet.
yeah,
It's not supposed to be this way.
yeah.
Well, here's a clue, right? Well, what do parents need to do then? They need to not only protect their children from those external things, they need to protect their children from
For
themselves. And
themselves.
and to say, hey, and what does that look like? It doesn't have to be some weird anything. It's, my son's name is Parker. Like, hey, Park, what's going on today? He's 20 now, but it never stops. So quite often, even now, I'll call him up. I'm like, hey, what's going on in your life today, man? What are you thinking about today? And he understands that
Yeah,
it doesn't matter if it's a win or a
yeah,
war. He can talk about it with dad.
yeah. That's right.
And he and I jump into the foxhole together.
That's right.
And and I've got other men in my life. I called one guy, literally used that term this morning because I was
Mm.
struggling this morning. I got up and I'm like, man, this imposter syndrome. I mean, it's why do we even have words like resilience and grit? It's because we live in a broken freaking world and there's something wrong and we are
That's
at
right.
war against it. And it's
Yeah,
messy, it's convoluted, it affects our sleep and our eating and our waking and our running and I mean everything. So I think to have a posture in this life where your eyes are wide open, right? And by the way, I think the one of the Hebrew roots of the word man means to turn chaos into order,
Mm,
right? So the masculine is in the Hebrew is one who turns chaos into order. So
mm,
that should be real front and center,
100%.
every day when we get up. And it doesn't mean that, again, that's got to be some weird warrior thing. That might be appropriate on some days, by the way.
Sure.
I mean, you get that.
Hmm.
It could be that the upside down kingdom says we need to fight with joy. We need
Hmm.
to fight with love. We need to fight, getting on our knees and
Mm,
asking for help. We need to fight with a hug. We need to fight with a whisper and a wink.
hmm.
Whatever is required in that moment. I want to be aware of those things. And
Mm.
so I really feel like it's we tend to be marketed to, that life is all great and everybody's winning, or someone's getting marginalized and picked on. There's no middle
Right.
road. There's no normal anymore. It's these
Yeah.
weird extremes.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
yeah, and we should know the full continuum, I think. You should know what real success looks like and real failure. If you only know failure, that's where you end up living. And
yeah,
and then by the way, the little wins, which can be important if you're recovering or if you're trying to be resilient, that's important. But if all you know is failure, a little win then suddenly seems like a big thing.
yeah,
And, again, I'm not putting down the idea of little wins, but if you don't know the full continuum, if you don't know what love looks like and hate looks like, you can't navigate between the two, or
yeah.
any other thing. Listen, I think I don't remember if I read it or if I made it up in my head, but it seems to me I had read something about you suggested that um, that identity is upstream from purpose. Um,
Um, I'm not quite sure I've phrased it that way. I think that identity informs purpose. Like
okay.
it's kind of like, and again, I think sometimes we get these words, they seem all like lofty and woohoo kind of
Yeah, yeah,
stuff,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Well, if I use the phrase, to quote Seth Godin, people like us do things like this. Well, it presupposes that I've done a little bit of deep work, right? So I've started identifying, right?
Yeah,
Literally writing down what
yeah.
is it that rises to the top for me in all of these categories we mentioned. And then of course, it starts to inform, purpose or mission or whatever you want to call it. And I'm not saying I got a lock on all of this stuff, but I do think that there's so much misunderstanding with regards to authenticity and identity and grit and resilience. And by the way, you mentioned, the word resilience. I think it's important to understand the difference between grit and resilience.
Mm,
And if someone is, per se gritty or resilient, what is it into and unto? If I fall in the mud and I get up real quickly, it might be just because I'm embarrassed, that kind of thing. Well,
mm,
sometimes the most gritty people, the most resilient people, they'll literally fall in the mud and they're just laughing like crazy because they don't care
mm.
about being embarrassed. They're just like,
Yeah,
well, that was awesome, wasn't it?
yeah,
Like that was just part of life.
yeah,
It's not an identity issue. And
yeah.
I think it's important to understand that resilience is bouncing back quickly, but it's bouncing back like in its purest form to a predetermined. Dr. Andy uses this analogy. He said if you bounce a ball on the ground really hard, it loses its shape for just a moment,
Mm.
right? But then it
Wow.
but
Yeah,
then it recovers. It's
yeah,
resilient into and unto a form that's predetermined. It's
yeah.
it's definable. It
Very
has
interesting.
it has like a circumference that you can measure and all this kind of thing. And it's kind of like magnetic north versus true north. Magnetic north, of course, is a compass where and we all do this, right? You walk into a room just like a compass, and you're reading the room. You're the magnetic field, as it were, right? So you're trying to kind of find north, but you're getting influenced by this, and you're getting influenced by that, and sometimes you throw the compass out the window and you just start being a people pleaser and trying to fit in. Whereas true north is like GPS coordinates. If I know that I'm heading true north, I know exactly, where north is. Like I
Yeah.
can define based on my values and so on where I'm headed and what I'm going to say yes to and no to whether
Yeah.
it's an opportunity or an obstacle. So
Yeah.
those things again sound a little bit woohoo, but I think it's when we just start to write them down and get really clear on those things, man, people like us do things like this. Oh, then I'm not just licking my finger, wondering, which way the wind is blowing today and trying to make it up as I go along.
Wow, man, that's good stuff, man. Really good stuff. So allow me if I could to throw out a couple of sort of scenarios to you, because what
Sure.
I want to do is just ask you, where do these people start
Yeah.
to let's say to discover who they are or to rediscover who they are, whatever the case might be. So let's start with the young person. They're fresh out of high school or fresh out of college, and and they're trying to figure out their path in life. Where do they start?
It's funny. The first thing that came to mind, and I think this applies for most people, is start hanging around
Mm,
people that are growth minded, right? Who aren't sucked into just nonsense.
yeah.
Like you want to find a tribe of people that say, I am for you, and
Mm,
good, bad, and ugly, like we're doing this together. I think it's really important to, like, by the way, here's another law like gravity. Parents, will go to absurd lengths to make sure their kids don't fall into the wrong crowd.
that's right.
Why?
Yeah.
Because they know they're going to become
Yeah,
like him.
that's
That's
right.
why they don't want that's why quite often they will bus them across town to go to different schools
Yeah,
because they don't want them hanging out with the thugs.
that's right.
That sounds kind of awful, but it's so true.
Yeah.
And it's so and it should be that way. Parents should protect their children from scoundrels. That's all there is to it. I don't want
Yep.
a bunch of low thinking people informing my son and daughter.
Yeah.
I mean, and so anyway, so I think it starts there. But again, I think that, if you just surround yourself with people and again read some books and stuff that start to ask really great questions.
Wow, that's so well said. And I wouldn't have thought of that as the first one, but I like it a lot. That because I'm even thinking about when I was a teenager before I went into the military. Thank God to the military. Uh,
Mm,
but I grew up in a military family too. So my dad he retired from
okay.
the army. I mean, so I spent most of my life. So I was fairly um, so I grew up around, military brats and and this, that, and the other. So I didn't really hang around, like I didn't get involved, and we moved too much. By the time I figured out if I wanted to get in trouble, we were moving. So that didn't happen so much. But I must say that after I got out of high school and so forth, I didn't go to college. Like you, I was a musician and a songwriter and wanted to do that. But I didn't think about the people I hung out with. I just thought if they were cool, if I liked them, maybe if they were a singer or songwriter or something, I would do that. But I didn't think about their character. I didn't think about the notion that you're bringing forward. I think it's very important is I didn't think about, let me hang with this crowd here because they're the ones that's going to elevate me or inform me or mentor me or help me. I just didn't think about that. I think that's brilliant. Okay, so now this person. How about just the normal man or woman out there? They're already immersed into their career. Um, they're not having maybe particular problems, if you will, but are asking themselves, Mel, is this it? There's got to be more. Again, I want to just draw in that average person that might be out there thinking that they want to discover a little bit more who they are and what their purpose is.
That's such a great question. So this is so weird. I don't think I've mentioned movies in interviews in a long time, but there's another movie called As Good as It Gets, right? And
Hmm.
Jack Nicholson's character walks through the lobby of this counseling room and he looks at everybody and says, and just stops, and everybody looks at him and he goes, what if this is as good as it gets? And you hear one person go,
Mm,
oh, like, so I think,
mm,
right, based upon everything from addiction to divorce to this epidemic of just people checking out on social media or
yeah.
just living lives that they're kind of existing, right? But they're
Hmm.
but the heroic heart of every man, right, who
Mm,
who longs to believe that the fairy tales are true with knights in shining armor and castles and nobles and knights at the round table, all that kind of stuff. I'll be honest, that's more true than anything that we could possibly lay our hands on.
Mm,
It's what we're all longing for. But most men have been lulled to sleep.
mm,
They don't even think that that's a thing. It's
yeah.
just, it's something that you might mention. It might give you some goosebumps, but well, that's for other men. That's for the titans of industry. That's for the people that are, the Illuminati, or I don't know. They're just kind of, it's
Mm,
out this, whatever. So where do you start? You know what? I think it starts with courage.
mm,
I think it starts with a man being willing to look in the mirror and say, there has to be more. I
mm,
know there's more, and I need to start surrounding myself with, again, with people that can introduce me to the larger story, as John Eldridge talks about, who can introduce me to myself, who can help awaken those things that I didn't even know were there, or maybe some things that I just killed off because it was easier just to deny that they were there, and to, you know, rather than experience just the longings of my heart, right? How about this? One of the things that I mentioned in the book is there are a few things in this life you're never going to hear people say.
mm.
How about this? Gee, I wish I couldn't play the piano. All right. Gee, I wish I didn't finish my college degree. You know? And how about this? Gee, I wish my dad didn't lead with such kindness and conviction and clarity.
Interesting.
And how about this?
Wow.
You're never going to hear a wife say, "Gee, I wish my husband didn't lead with such kindness and nobility and love and courage and joy." You know what I mean? Like you're never going to hear that.
Wow.
I mean, you might hear that
Mm,
from, how about this? You might hear it on social media from a bunch of screaming people in the street, right?
yeah.
That hate men because men have
Yeah.
been horrible to them.
Yeah.
But guess what? When you get them alone
Yeah.
and you start asking them,
Yeah.
how did your dad treat you?
Yeah.
Well, the tears are going to start streaming down their
I
face,
agree with that.
and they're going to say, "God, I wish my dad would have held me and told me that I was lovely.
Yeah.
I wish my dad would
Yeah.
have delighted in me. I wish my dad would have shown me his strength and gave me security."
Yeah.
Right? So
Wow.
what does that mean? It means that God has put himself, right?
Yeah.
The great hero lives in us. He's given us a desire to be that man.
Mm,
And when we just deny it and put our heads in the sand,
mm,
well, then everything from fragmentation to feeling stuck to being apathetic and avoidant start to take root, and addiction and everything else. Well, how do we know? There's some clues there, right? When you haven't understood the author has made you so beautifully and
mm,
powerfully authentic, there are clues.
mm,
Apathy, avoidance. You're going to avoid certain
mm,
people and places. Imposter syndrome, the sin of
mm,
comparison,
mm,
depression and anxiety. Well, how do you know you found who you are and you're living in that beautiful plumb line? Well, guess what? You're going to feel natural, normal, genuine, authentic, resilient, free, courageous. You're going to have a sense of mission and purpose that's not going to be weird and kind of overdone, but you're not going to have that big question mark inside of
yeah.
you that you feel, and so
Hmm.
does everybody else around you.
Hmm. Wow. So you mentioned stuck, and that was my third person that I wanted to introduce to you and ask you what does, what do you say to the person that's stuck? They feel stuck in so many different ways, and this can be a wide range of people, from young people who have gone to college, they in 2 years, and they're like, they've been thinking about it for a long time, but they just feel stuck. But it's probably somebody more, who is, um, well, I mean, they could be in a big life transition. They may have lost a job, but let's just qualify this person as, where does the stuck person start?
Yeah, and so you know what, man, I want to be really careful that I don't, come in with some pad answer here, because
Fair
I
enough. I mean,
I think that if someone calls and tells you that I'm stuck, how about this? If a man does and he says he's just not doing well, it's
mm,
10 times worse than you think it is. That's my
mm,
experience. I think that if a man has the courage to come and tell anybody, "Hey, I'm just having a hard time." Well, guess what?
mm,
It's
mm,
probably way worse than you think it is.
mm,
So I think that where do you start? Man, I would say that, how about this? If someone comes and tells you that, give them a big freaking hug
Mm.
and just sit there with them and say,
Mm.
man, I've been there, man. Tell me more.
Yeah.
What's up? And quite
Yeah.
often what I do is I tell someone, yeah, in fact, I did it this weekend. I said, hey, I just want you to remember you're in the safest room on earth right now. Like nothing you say is going to scare me away. So I think that people need to feel that sense of psychological safety, right? That where they, man, I feel like I've got somebody here who can navigate this
Yeah.
life with me and walk with
Yeah.
me. So I
Yeah.
think so to answer your question, if you're stuck, please go
Yeah.
find somebody who's not going to try to fix you, right? And
Yeah.
going to give you some stupid formula, but someone who is going to introduce you to the one who made you and
Hmm.
tell you you're made of something spectacular. How about you and
Hmm.
I just start walking together and get the shovel out and start digging?
Yeah.
Because you're going to start finding some clues of things that you might want to set down.
Yeah.
And it's more, and you know what else too is it's probably going to take some courage. There's
Yeah.
probably going to be a few things that you need to draw a line in the sand and just say probably, I'm not going to participate in this, activity or with these people or whatever it is that might be just
Mm.
dragging you down.
Yeah. Boy, that's so beautifully said, David. It really is because, and I completely agree with that. Sometimes, and I've learned this in my own life, I wrote a book about it, The Gap Between Two Worlds. It came out
Mhm.
of my transition from the military. I say from 20 years in the military, but frankly, it was really from 40 years in the military. Growing up in a military family, my
Yeah.
dad was a Green Beret. He was a hard
Wow.
ass. I mean,
Wow.
in fact, I tell people that, I think I was more in the military growing up than when I was actually in the military.
I
Uh,
couldn't
of
imagine. I can imagine.
well, you ask Army people. I was Air Force. They would say, yeah, I mean, Air Force is not really military, but I'd say that in jest.
It is.
But here's the thing. What one of the things that I learned, and I think you've leaned really well into this, is that, the self-awareness piece is so important because even being aware of the idea that your perceptions can lead you astray, man.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
might think you're stuck. You might completely feel like you're stuck. You may have all of the emotions and sort of the perception that renders you stuck. But to get around a person like you who just will sit with you, love with you, um, listen to you, you know, help you think through things. There are people, I believe, that can come out of even as little as one conversation going,
Yeah.
"Ah, maybe I'm not as stuck as I thought I was."
You know,
That's a
you know
very
that well, yeah, absolutely. And
jump in, man.
that verse that says, the hope deferred makes the heart sick.
Mm,
I think that's probably, when you
beautiful.
describe someone in their, 40s or whatever, 30s and
Mm,
40s, I think they just don't have any hope. It's like
hmm.
they don't know what they don't know.
That's right.
And so it's so to even like you said, even have one conversation, be like, man, I listened to a podcast or I read this book or I heard this sermon or I heard a quote like, well, of course there's more. Well, then what? Well, then you start just leaning in a little bit. And once you do,
Wow.
things start getting a little less scary. So here's something else I want to say too. I
Mm,
think it's really important to understand. And again, I'm a Christian, and
hmm.
I think we need to have a really, maybe how about this, a funny, sober perspective of things. And I heard someone say the other day, "You are way worse off than you think you are," and and I think it's really important to understand
Yeah.
that even C.S. Lewis, which who I
Mm,
just super
yeah,
really
he's
admire, he got up and
profound. Yeah.
yeah, he would say, "I'm an atheist before my second cup of coffee in the morning." And I just think it's funny. And obviously he's trying to
Hmm.
paint a picture that, wow, I'm so human, right? I'm frail
Hmm.
and I mean, I get a paper cut and I'm whining like a 3-year old, right? And it's so I think it's really important to understand that. And how about this? Tim Keller says you are way more extravagantly loved and adored than you could possibly imagine. Right. So those juxtapositions can coexist. I am known in my hypocrisy, in my weakness, in my stuckness, and all the things that just make me human and make me me, and all the brokenness in the world we live in. But I'm way more loved than I'd ever dared hope. Like
Yes.
it's like it's $1 over here and $1 million over here, just
Yes.
flooding over the top of that. So what? It gives us absolute freedom to look internally with grace that is unmeasured and just start to explore, not only for ourselves, but then guess what? We get to give that away like we're
Yeah.
made of it. And I think that's to me, that's what
Yeah.
love looks like.
Man, that's so fantastic. You know what I'm thinking here, just as you say that, that one of the things I think it's been I think it's just solid understanding, just almost common sense anymore that if you are brought up in a home where you are loved, that foundation by itself gives you strength and confidence and encouragement because of that being the foundation, and you feel like I'm already on solid ground here because I have a family that loves me
Yeah.
and so forth. So I'll just leave it at that. Well, maybe in part to your point that I think you're making is is I think one of the things that people, even Christians who are aware of these statements about love, and I will certainly speak to myself, and we probably won't ever truly know until one day, is that you can't even compare that love to the love of God. And this is what I hear people um,
Yeah.
so now again, imagine having the understanding, I guess is my point, how different you would live if you had this just rock solid understanding of how much not only your family loves you, but God loves you. I mean that this if you're
Yeah.
the worst things can go wrong, with your life. You could do a lot of bad stuff, and then somebody says, but you know what? I got to be honest with you. God still loves you. It's not,
Yeah.
it's real,
And and you know what else too is I think sometimes, and again, I do this all the time. It's
Mm,
we think that love is like the love of God is just taking an eraser and just wiping off the
mm,
board.
mm.
There's nothing there, right? No, it's so much more than that. I heard someone the other day give an analogy. It's like if you, and again, I think this has to be true because our hearts so deeply long for it. It's what we're looking for most of all. But lady at church, Paige Brown, told the story. She said the good news is this: it's when you go into the bank and ask for a loan and they kick you out. And as you're walking to your car, they chase you into the parking lot and say, hold on, we've made a
Yeah,
huge mistake. And they bring you back in. The president grabs you by the hand and brings you into his office and takes his picture off the wall and his placard off the desk and sits you in his chair and hands you the keys and says, everything is yours, right? Either that's true or none of it is. Either that is
interesting.
a
Yeah,
love that looks like there is no end and it's not transactional, or I don't believe any of it's true.
yeah,
And that's what we're longing for. Would someone know me and my all of my messiness and my hypocrisy and yuckiness or whatever and celebrate me, not just put up with me,
right.
but to say
There you go.
you are my firstborn and
Yeah,
you get everything.
yeah.
That's the heart of the Father,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's what we're that's when
Mm-hmm.
when Parker and my daughter Kate, like my goal, and again, I don't do it, I mean, I do it horribly imperfectly, but my hope, and they know this, my hope for them is you guys inherit everything. You're both the firstborn. You both are the object of my delight. You can do no wrong. Let's do life together. I remember, by the way, my daughter when she was 14, I think. She said, she goes, Dad, do you ever think that I'm gonna get really rebellious in my, teenage years and go start drinking and
Mm-hmm.
carousing or whatever? And she had her language around it. And I looked at her and I said, Kate, I don't care. If you go, I'm going too. Like, let's just do it together. And
I bet she didn't expect that.
no, but you know what? What did I say?
Yeah, yeah.
Wherever you
Yep.
go, I'm
Yeah,
going.
I'm going. Yeah,
Right? Wherever
yeah,
you go, I'm going. And that's what gives the man who is stuck.
yeah.
That's what gives, the mom and dad who just are, drowning in three little babies or something. It's that type of a posture, a lens to see life through that gives them the ability to look up at the very least and to say, well, all right, whatever we're doing here is not working. maybe we can go get some help or read a book together or start to
Yeah.
explore that there's something more. We're not going to
Yeah.
double down on
Yeah.
stupid.
Yeah. Wow. Well, listen, before we wrap this up, I would love for you to maybe again share the title of your book and just talk about it a little bit. Maybe maybe th things that you're writing about, that you're thinking about. When is it
Yeah.
coming out, by the way? Do you
Yeah,
already have
so
a
I
date
I
set?
just finished the kind of the manuscript, sent it to the editor. So we're going to start knocking on some publishing doors,
Okay.
soon. And who knows, right? I
Yeah.
don't it's not, I mean, nobody knows who I am, and I'm
Mhm.
just kind of developing a platform to start talking about these things. And
Sure.
but the Guardians of Grit is, largely what we've just talked about, right? It's introducing a father to himself, and helping him do the same thing for his son, and
Mm.
to start exploring what does it look like to understand authenticity at its core, to understand identity in a very practical way, right? How do you identify these things? And really this idea that we're, hey son, we're doing this together. Wherever you go, I'm going.
That's amazing. We should know, and I'm about to ask you where people can find you, but where people can kind of keep track of you and see when your book is coming out. It's going to be fascinating. I can tell, it's just obvious in talking to you that it's going to be a fantastic book. And so
Thank you.
I wish you lots of luck. Well, listen, first of all, and you don't have to, but you're welcome to. I try to always ask my guests, is there anything that I didn't ask you or that you would just like to say or talk about before, you tell folks where to find you?
Yeah, it's funny. My favorite quote, and I mention this almost every time I'm speaking anywhere, is by Benjamin Disraeli, former PM of England back in the day. And he
Mm,
said, "The greatest good you can do for another is not to share with him your riches, but to reveal to him his own."
mm,
And I gotta say, I just feel like, that's if that's not the heart of the dad, right?
that's
Hey,
right.
son, let's you and I find the riches that God put in you, the hierarchy of things that just
Mm,
really resonate with you, and give those things a name and validate those things until you believe them. I mean, it's
mm,
just like it's extraordinary. So,
mm,
and then as far as how about this? As far as where can people find me? So, I released a new song a few months ago.
mm.
You're familiar with the group Journey.
Oh, yeah.
I actually recorded Open Arms, but I did it in English and Italian. And so, if you go on the different streaming platforms, you can find it there. But my website is, David Ask Music, davidask music.com.
Okay, fantastic. And can people reach out to you on social media and those sorts of
Oh,
things? I
sure.
mean, you're on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. I
Yeah.
know you're on LinkedIn and
Yeah.
Instagram and these other places. And
Yeah.
so just putting your name, David Osk is not ASK is not like the most common name.
No.
In fact, there was a couple of times that I had to look at, wait a minute, is that the beginning of a sentence or,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah. So we'll listen, and of course we'll put all your links in the show notes and all those sorts of things. What a wonderful conversation.
Thanks.
What such great wisdom and understanding. It's just very, you just do come across as very grounded, and so your words mean more because they do, in fact, come as
Thanks.
authentic.
Well, I appreciate that.
Hmm.
I'm just another man, just, leaning in, figuring it out. So thanks for having me, though. Really honored to be here.
Well, I appreciate that, and I will say that you are, and your first book, it was on bookkeeping. Is that what you said, or?
Actually, no, my first book was a children's book. Yeah, not bookkeeping. I get what you were saying there. It's actually on Amazon. It's called The Very Scary Noise in the Trunk, and it's just a little children's book
Oh,
that was
that's cute.
and but yeah, the new one coming, I'm pretty excited about.
That's outstanding. Well, we'll look forward to it. Well, listen, thank you so much, David Osk, for being on Grow Yourself and really imparting your wisdom to my viewers and I hope now your viewers. And God bless you, sir.
Thank you.